So today I'll be talking about scarlet fever, which was a worldwide epidemic and has been seen for many centuries, and it became prevalent in the United States around the 1830s. So, understanding scarlet fever. You'll see in this picture here, this is a picture of the bacterium that is associated with scarlet fever. Unfortunately, it was not known what the cause was until around 1923. But during the 19th century, there were major outbreaks of scarlet fever, but the cause was essentially unknown. Some individuals believed that scarlet fever was communicable, and though some people managed to isolate the streptococci bacterium, they were unsure of the role it played in causing scarlet fever. People debated on whether scarlet fever was even infectious at all. If you remember from earlier in this course, the germ theory wasn't developed until the 1860s, so during the major outbreaks in the United States around the 1830s, they really had no idea that microorganisms could even be associated with these diseases. In the 1900s, or 1905 to be exact, there were also reports of milk-borne scarlet fever in a community northeast of Brighton, and that was most commonly found in children, which was consistent with other outbreaks. Another cause of scarlet fever that gained popularity in England was that people would be infected if they did not demonstrate a steadfast faith in Christ. So that was another thought cause that scarlet fever could have stemmed from, but it wasn't what was actually the cause. The actual cause of scarlet fever was identified in 1923 by Dr. George Frederick Dick and his wife, Dr. Gladys Henry Dick. So they were able to isolate the Streptococcus bacterium and created the toxin used for immunization, and then they devised the Dick method for disease prevention. Their work was continued by Dr. Rebecca Lansfield, and she developed the idea of type-specific immunity, as there are pathogenic and non-pathogenic strains of this particular bacterium. Today, it is known that scarlet fever actually can be spread through respiratory droplets, like when you cough or sneeze. In this picture here, you'll see one of the common symptoms associated with scarlet fever, which is a red bumpy rash all over the body. But overall, it's been defined in similar ways over time. It has always been described as a fever because that is one of the most prevalent symptoms. It used to be thought of as much more dangerous than it is today and was much more common. In fact, in a very famous work of literature, Little Woman by Louisa May Alcott, Beth, one of the characters, actually passed away due to scarlet fever. Due to better research and understanding of the cause, today it is less common and not usually fatal. During the 19th century outbreaks, however, these symptoms were described by Dr. William Potts DeWeese to be, and I quote, "As the disease proceeds, the neck and lower jaw grow stiff, the tonsils swell and become marked with speck, which degenerate into ulcers covered with superficial ash-colored sloughs. The sloughs on the tonsils grow fouler, and the discharge from them in the nostrils becomes exceedingly acrid." Today, the symptoms of scarlet fever are described as a very red sore throat, high fever, whitish coating on the tongue or strawberry tongue, which is when the tongue is very red and bumpy, red skin rash, swollen lymph nodes, and an occasional episode of nausea and vomiting. So overall, the symptoms have been very similar, but they have been described in different ways, but that's just due to a change in language. This picture here you will see was an artistic rendition of bloodletting, which was a common procedure used to treat diseases, especially when the four humors was a prevalent, or imbalances in four humors was a prevalent cause of disease that was thought of. So during these 19th century outbreaks, they often used bloodletting to treat scarlet fever as a way to restore the four humors. If you recall, the four humors were yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, and blood. Each of these was also associated with an element and a description, like blood being associated with air and being wet and hot. Fever was thought to be due to an imbalance in the humor of blood and therefore was often treated with bloodletting. Doctors often removed lancets from their bag and would bleed a patient until, and I quote, also a quote by Dr. Williams Pot DeWeese, "a paleness of the lips and cheeks came on, eventually resulting in syncope." Another common way that was used to treat scarlet fever was to prescribe emetics, which are medications that induce vomiting, which were said to purify the body. Strict diets and careful monitoring was also employed. Today, doctors use rapid strep tests and throat culture swabs, which are used to see if they can grow a culture with the bacterium that causes scarlet fever. to determine if the patient has scarlet fever, and then they're treated with antibiotics such as penicillin and amoxicillin if scarlet fever is found. There is no definitive cure, but it can be treated with these antibiotics. In society, it has been understood to be a serious one that is most common and most dangerous in children because of often complications, and the symptoms have remained relatively consistent over the past 2 centuries. The alleged cause of scarlet fever has changed over time, as well as the way to treat it. During the 19th century outbreaks, it was viewed as much more severe and fatal, but now it is less common and easily treatable through years of research and understanding its causes and the best ways to treat it. While there still can be complications and there is no definitive cure, it is much less fatal than it used to be due to modern medicine. So, although it is less common than during these 19th and 20th centuries and easily treatable, there still have been some outbreaks. Studies were done on the outbreaks of scarlet fever in the early 2010s in Hong Kong and the United Kingdom. Both of these studies found that the most common age that people contracted scarlet fever was between 3 and 5 years old, which is also consistent with reports from the 19th and 20th centuries that scarlet fever was often found in children. That gives you a little overview of scarlet fever and how it has changed over time, and I hope you learned something.